Well, welcome to My Footpaths podcast leadership series. Today, we're very excited to have President Bill Johnson of Youngstown State University in Youngstown, Ohio. President Johnson, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Brad. Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you, and we're excited to have you. I always like to start off the podcast with you, and I always like to lead off with a question about your mentors, and who are the mentors that really helped shape your career path?
Oh my goodness, that's a long list because a lot of people stood in the gap for me. I won't belabor this point, but came up through a very troubled childhood with an alcoholic father that presented some challenges. But I was born and raised on a two-wheel wagon rut mule farm on the cotton and tobacco farms of North Carolina, where every day was a survival day. Everybody worked. Everybody either pushed or pulled the wagon. Nobody got a chance to ride in the wagon unless they had to. We had no indoor plumbing, cooked and heated on two big old black pot-bellied stoves. And so I learned early, the values that of service and sacrifice and teamwork and family and faith and all of those kinds of things. And so I would have to say, first and foremost, the primary mentor in my life was my mother. My mom was a single working mom, worked two jobs most of her life to make ends meet for us. She didn't get along with my dad for reasons that were beyond her or our control, and consequently, we moved around a lot. I went to 13 schools in 12 years.
Wow.
So I had very little self-confidence professionally that I was going to amount to anything beyond that farm. So obviously, my mother instilled in me as much as she could a real can-do attitude. My grandfather demonstrated to me how you can be strong and tender at the same time. He spent a lot of time with me as a youngster, helping to develop my work ethic, helping to develop my faith. But it wasn't until I joined the Air Force in 1973 that I started cultivating professional mentors. And that list is as long as my arm. Bosses that I had, supervisors that I had that saw something in me that I did not know was there in many cases, and encouraged me to step outside, step away from the mirror and the little farm boy that I saw looking back at myself every day, and realize that there were things that I could accomplish. And I think one of the primary ones was the boss that I had about 5 years into my Air Force career. He called me in one day and said, "Look, I'm going to put you in for an award, but to win this award, you've got to be able to show, I've got to be able to say that you're doing some sort of self-improvement, that you're self-motivated. So go to the education office and see what kind of college classes they have for you to take at night." And I said, "Please, boss, I don't want to do that. I am not college material. I'm scared to death of math and science. I didn't perform well in those in high school." And he said, "I didn't ask you to go. I told you to get over there and do it today." And that's when I found out that I had 2 years of college credit already under my belt, because I was in a highly specialized technical career field. My job was teaching pilots how to fly on complex simulators and to maintain those simulators. So I had a lot of math and science that I didn't even know I had under my belt. And one thing led to another, and I got an ROTC scholarship and was commissioned in the Air Force, went to pilot training, largely due to an inner ear problem that I had. I ended up not flying very long, became a communications and computer systems officer, and that was like throwing a fish to water. I grasped that career area very, very quickly and worked for some amazing, amazing people in the Air Force, generals, warfighters. I worked for the senior command team, for example, that went after Noriega in Panama.
Wow.
I worked for a one-star general that had led the attack on Libya and Gaddafi in 1986. And so these people showed me a level of professionalism and what it means to be in the people business, because they helped me understand that as a leader, you don't there is no I in team, and a leader cannot do anything on their own if they can't create an environment where those that work for them are elevated and allowed and empowered to be the best that they can be, then the organization doesn't get very far. So I would just have to tell you, Brad, I've had a lot of very, very strong mentors in my professional career.
Wow, that's great. And I love that background, from military service to, growing up in a rural community and, working as a congressman. And so how has that background influenced your views on access to education and also the needs of students from underserved regions?
Yeah, I talk about diamonds in the rough. I talk about that a lot here at Youngstown State. And let me jump to the end of this answer first and tell you one of the programs that I implemented when I got here is called the Penguin Prep Program. The Penguin is our mascot, and I got the Penguin Prep title to it, modeled it after the service academies. I nominated for 13 years. I nominated service academy candidates from my district, and going through that process, I learned a lot. One of the things I learned is that oftentimes candidates would not get selected for the service academy, but they would get selected for the prep school. If the academy or the branch of service said, "Hey, we've got a strong leader here, but they need some help academically," they would send them to the prep school, which was a year of preparatory work in
Right.
advance of going into an academy class. And I thought, we've got lots of students here in our very rural region, a lot of low income families, and we've got a lot of students who don't believe they're college material, very much like I was. I went to 13 schools in 12 years. And so I had a lot of gaps in my education, and I didn't really place a lot of value in education
Yeah.
until I got one myself and understood what that really meant. So I wanted to make sure when I got here to Youngstown State that we gave students who might be close but not quite eligible for a bachelor's degree program or something like that. We bring those students into our honors college in the summer after they graduate from high school, before they would start college in the fall. And we put them under the mentorship of our honors college, our dean, Dr. Amy Cosentino, and her students. And it begins to build up the confidence level of those students. And we've had it in place now for 2 years, and we double the size of that program in the second year. And it's going very well. So the value of education, it was Benjamin Franklin that said an investment in education pays the best dividends. And that is very, very true. You oftentimes, you get bogged down in the course schedules and the syllabus and all of that, and the time consuming part of getting an education. You oftentimes don't realize how important that education is until you get down the road and suddenly you remember, oh, wait a minute, I remember that. This is value to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, now let's shift a little bit to Youngstown State and let's talk about some of the top strategic priorities that you're focusing on so far during your presidency and as you go forward? And why were those chosen as the most pressing needs for Youngstown State?
Well, that's a wide, that's a deep and broad answer too, because I can tell you, universities all across America are struggling right now. Our population in the United States is declining. Our birth rate is not at a birth rate that will sustain our culture long term. I'm not a sociologist because I can't tell you when the crisis point is going to come. But we've got 60. We have roughly 10,000 65 age and older Americans that are retiring every single day. That's 10,000 this week, 70,000. I'm sorry, 10,000 today, 70,000 this week, 3.5 million this year. That's going to continue over the next 20 years or so. We're going to put over 50 million Americans on the retirement roll, and we don't have a birth rate that is replacing that aging, retiring workforce. Consequently, the number of Americans that are graduating from high school that are college eligible and college bound, that pool is shrinking also. So there is an intense competition out there among colleges and universities for enrollment to fill the seats in the classrooms. And we have a dual job, not only to fill the classrooms, but also to fill the classrooms in programs that are meeting the workforce needs of today and preparing students to meet the challenges that they'll face tomorrow. So we're casting a really wide net. So enrollment, growth of enrollment, and exposing our brand and the high quality education that we offer, that's one of our biggest strategic moves that we're making here at the university. And we have several enrollment partners that we're working with to expose our brand across the country. And Brad, it's working because we had just this year, the second year in a row that we've had enrollment increase when many other universities and colleges are either stagnant or flat. We are continuing to grow, and it's the first time in over a decade that Youngstown State University has had enrollment increases 2 years in a row. So we're really excited about that. Some of the things that we're doing to sort of ancillarily promote enrollment, our high performing programs, we've got to be able to expand those. We can't afford to be turning applicants that are qualified away due to lack of capacity. So I'm working very, very closely with our provost and our academic team to make sure in programs like nursing and dental hygiene and respiratory therapy and radiology technology, that we are creating enough clinical and lab space to be able to take the number of students that are applying, because those high performance programs are what's going to determine our future.
Well, and congratulations on your continued success, because again, as you alluded to, there is so much competition out there across the higher ed landscape, and especially in Ohio. And you touched upon some of the emerging opportunities as you see them, such as potentially, and I'll throw some out here and love to get your feedback around micro credentials, online learning, supporting adult learners and what that might look like. And then also partnerships with private industry. So kind of tied to what do those career outcomes look like? Can you speak to some of those?
Absolutely. And I didn't want to make the last answer too long, but you actually hit on one of our strategic initiatives that began right after I got here. We had a major community college in our region. In fact, the only community college servicing our region closed down. They had some 40,000 students, both in person and online. We were contacted by the governor and asked to step in the gap to provide a continuum of education choices to the citizens of this region. And so in a matter of months, we stood up and got approved some 60 plus new courses and programs for credentials and certificates and badges and associate degrees, segueing right into bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degrees, all under one university umbrella. In other words, we have implemented here at Youngstown State a community college structure and a technical college structure within our four-year university umbrella. And we're the first university in our state to do that in a region that does not have a community college servicing for those students who don't see a four-year college degree as in their wheelhouse. So we've got anything and everything that people coming out of high school might want here at Youngstown State. We do have a wealth of online program offerings as well, both in our undergraduate and our graduate programs. So we're covering the waterfront because we understand, and we're in close contact with the businesses and industries in our region. We understand that the workforce of today is not going to be the workforce of tomorrow because technology is changing at such a rapid pace. Brad, think about AI and quantum computing and what those emerging technologies are going to mean to solving the problems of tomorrow and the problems that they're going to create too in how those technologies are utilized. So we've got to have the doers and the makers and the builders, right? The trades, the plumbers, the pipe fitters, the carpenters, the glazers, the operating engineers, et cetera. But we've also got to have the great theoretical minds, the ones that are looking at how AI and quantum computing is going to fit together and what happens to the human experience when AI is in full bloom, when nobody has to think critically anymore about how to solve a problem. They just push a button on their mobile device and their AI app tells them how to fix their car, how to cook their food, what kind of clothes to buy for this kind of event that they're going to. And so, I mean, it's almost like a future of George Orwell's 1984. How do we teach critical thinking in an environment where critical thinking is no longer necessary because you've got AI and quantum computing that's filling the bill?
Well, I think, just kind of carrying on that conversation element right there. When you look at AI, it's such it can be a valuable tool, but from your vantage point, and maybe looking at the institution as a starting ground, how do you make sure that you implement the assets AI can bring, but also make sure that the student still is utilizing his or her soft skills and brain power to do their own work, if you will?
That is the challenge. That is the challenge that you're talking about. And I'm not going to tell you that we or any other university has got it all figured out just yet, but you just articulated the challenge. I tell people, first of all, there is no such thing as artificial intelligence. I'm an information technology professional. Both my undergraduate and graduate degrees are in information technology. I was working with AI back in the late 70s, early 80s when I went through Georgia Tech to get my graduate degree. AI is artificial intelligence is an industry buzzword, but at the end, at the foundation of that system, it is a machine learning system that's based on an algorithm that's written by a human being. AI takes two things to function well. One is access to massive amounts of data, and number two, high-speed computing. Once you have those two, there's virtually no limit to what problem you can't solve with an AI machine learning type system. The two dangers that we have with AI go to the way you phrased your question. How do we avoid being fearful of AI, right? Because of its impacts on critical thinking. How do we make sure that we're not so fearful that we stay away from it? And how do we make sure that we don't depend on it before we fully understand the power of it? It is a tool. It is never going to be, in my view, it is never going to be an okay path that AI replaces critical thinking with human beings. And I've had a number of professionals in other disciplines, economics and psychology, that have validated my thinking and my concern that there's been no time in American history and world history when teaching critical thinking at colleges and universities would be more important than it is today, because AI is going to change all of that. So I can tell you, here at Youngstown State, we have a very rigorous process, making sure that our professors are teaching AI as a tool and enabling it as a tool, but also looking for those little bits of evidence and making sure that our students are critically thinking on their own. It's one thing to use it as a tool and an aid. It's quite something else, for example, to let it write your term paper. We can figure that out in a heartbeat. You can recognize an AI term paper, at least with today's technology. You can. You might not be able to in the future, but who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a question about your office. So I see some of the, possibly a diploma. I think is that back there behind you? What's your favorite piece? Maybe just describe again, whether it's a diploma. I see a picture.
Well, my favorite piece is the photograph of my wife and me.
There we go.
Overlooking the city of Washington, D.C. some years ago. She is first and foremost, I told people when I came to work here, I'm just grateful that the Board of Trustees hired Leanne Johnson to be the first lady so I could tag along for the ride. Most people would rather spend their time with her than with me anytime. But you'll also notice every piece up there has a very special meaning. Of course, eagles. I am red, white, and blue. My blood bleeds all three of those colors. So you see a lot of eagles there. You also see I had a very good working relationship with the building trades. So you see some plumber and pipe fitter things there. You see some recognition of the state of Ohio to some of the initiatives that we've taken here. You also see one of the plaques that I got from Special Operations Command when I retired from the Air Force. One of the highlights of my career was leading the CIO, the director of the CIO staff for U.S. Special Operations Command. That was a great assignment. And there's a lot of others that you don't see. So there's kind of these are the feel-good things that remind me of those mentors and those people that sewed into my life as I was coming along. They keep me humble.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So I do have to ask. So you have 4 children, is that right?
I have 4 children and 6 grandchildren.
Okay, and so I have to touch upon the student, right? One of your sons is a student at Youngstown State.
Right.
So I'm just curious, when he sees dad, does he come up and give you a hug? Does he give you a quick wave? Does he keep walking on by?
When we first started out, when I first came here as president, he was a sophomore, and you bring up a good point. He was a little bit standoffish. He wouldn't come around too much in public because he wants to stand on his own 2 feet. And everything that he's done here at this university, he's earned on his own, not on the name of his dad. But I'm proud to say today that now that he fully trusts that I'm going to let him stand on his own, both in terms of his victories and his failures, I'm going to let him work through those. he's now a lot more comfortable. And yes, when we're out in public, he's an intern in our athletic department, in the communications department of our athletic programs. He comes up and gives me a hug. He's not ashamed of all to at all. And this is crazy. But he called me a couple of weeks ago and he said, "Hey, Dad, I'm going to," because he graduates this semester with his undergraduate in communications. He said, "Dad, I'm going to be sitting beside you during commencement for our college." I said, What do you mean?" I said, "I've got to be sitting up on the stage." He said, "Well, I am too." He said, "Because I've been selected to be the student speaker at commencement. Our dean selected me." And so I'm sure there are going to be those that say, "Oh my God, he's doing that because he's the president's son." I had nothing to do with it. They didn't call me and tell me. They didn't ask me my advice. He was the one that went through that process. One of his professors nominated him, and he had to go through a series of interviews. And I'm very, very proud of him.
Yeah, that is great. That is a great story, a great overview, and
I'm
I've
proud of
I've
all my
got
kids, Brad. All of them have been very successful in their careers. Very, very smart kids.
well, and I will tell you, so I have four kids of my own, and one of the things that you alluded to is that, I give them hugs and I give them kisses, and I'm like, you know what? If you're embarrassed, too bad.
That's right. I say the same thing. I'm not shy about saying I love you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Does anyone reference Maverick or Top Gun because they know you were in the Air Force?
I get that sometimes, and I wish I could say that I flew like Maverick. I fought like Top Gun. I can't say that. Unfortunately, my inner ears got the better of me, and I didn't fly that long. My real aviation claim to fame are some of the escapades I had in my private, because I'm a instrument rated general aviation pilot. So I did own an airplane for a while. I flew it around Ohio and back and forth to DC. And my son Nathan and my other kids flew around with me at times. So I love aviation, but no, sad to say, I'm not a Maverick or a Top Gun.
Well, I'll tell you, your background, your career is incredibly distinguished. It is a pleasure to be talking to you. And I'll wrap up with one final question. Where do you see Youngstown State a decade from now?
Youngstown State is going to be a flagship university. We're going to hone in and optimize our high performing programs. I want to see us back to the 15,000 plus student load. From 1975 to 1990, we were right around 15,000. We dropped below 15,000 students only three times, and that was during the 70s, in the middle of the energy crisis, the oil embargo, and all that we faced there. But this university has an amazing legacy. It's been here since 1908. We've got a vast region and a state that is in need and demands a plethora, a full spectrum of workforce, from credentials, certificates, badges, degrees, doctorate degrees, etc. So we're going to be the go-to university of choice. That's where I'm trying to place us.
Well, excellent. Well, President Bill Johnson, thank you so much for your time. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
Well, thank you very much, Brad. I appreciate you choosing me.